As soon as I started playing Nince, I was shocked I hadn't heard about it sooner. Nince is a Metroidvania, or action platformer, or whatever you want to call it, in the likes of Hollow Knight. Its release in May of last year came with little fanfare, at least here in the West. I only heard about it from a friend who found it on Game Pass, and yet I truly think it stands shoulder to shoulder with the best of its genre. And of the many reasons I love this game, the first, but not least, is I would dare to say that Nince is an objectively beautiful game. If you've seen literally any of my other reviews, you will know that I have a soft spot for stylized games. But if someone said they didn't like the pixelated grunge of Cultic or Intravenous, I might be able to see where they're coming from, even if I disagree. However, if someone said they genuinely hated Nince's art style, I would capture them and study them for science. The hand-drawn art and animation is very well done on a technical level, which, as well as just being very pleasant to look at, is also important for the intricacies of the gameplay to work, since it requires precision that wouldn't be possible with crude animation or environmental design. On a not-so-technical level, I adore this art direction. I'm a big fan of cyberpunk and techno-fantasy, plus the East Asian influence is such a breath of fresh air for me. The devs refer to this style as Taopunk, and I fuck with it heavy. The incredible range of environments here make every area distinct and fresh, and yet they contain artistic cohesion that just works for me. Sure, taking an elevator from Star Trek to Indiana Jones is a bit strange, but it somehow manages to not be all that jarring and remains consistently readable for gameplay. The visual designs of the enemies themselves do a great job of visually communicating what they're like to fight. These red-clad soldier-looking types are generally simple and straightforward, but tough and hard-hitting. And these greener ninja-looking types are tricky and deadly, but are generally squishier. While all the character design is fantastic, the bosses are the highlights. They each match the aesthetic of the respective regions, and are all memorable for their own individual reasons. In terms of audio, God, the parries sound so good. And it's great that they do, because this is probably the most frequently played sound effect in the game. Beyond that, the other sound effects are also pretty solid but aren't particularly noteworthy, which means they're done well. None that I can recall are jarring, out of place, or missing. They serve their purpose in further telegraphing attacks alongside the visuals, with most standard attacks having a kind of little shine noise and unblockable attacks having a distinct electrical sound as they're being charged up. The music, on the other hand, is anything but unnoteworthy, combining traditional instruments with modern electronic music into a fun and unique blend. A lot of the exploration music feels ominous and eerie, which fits the overall vibes of the areas and the game's story as a whole, but combat music feels appropriately energetic while still carrying that undertone of unease. But sometimes that undertone leaves. In the few places where that happens, you can really feel it. Let's get into how the game actually plays. Nince is a Metroidvania, a genre whose name people will never stop complaining about, but we are stuck with, whether we like it or not. To give my rough definition of the term, in a Metroidvania, you explore a 2D platformy open world while fighting monsters, searching for loot that you can use to upgrade yourself and unlock new abilities that can be used to fight enemies more effectively and access more of the intricately designed map. In that definition, the emphasis should be placed heavily on the last quarter. In Nince, when you unlock the heavy attack, it can be used to break through enemy shields, but it can also be used to break through some walls that were previously impenetrable, allowing you to access new areas. Or, when you unlock air dashing, it can be used to more effectively evade attacks, or to get across gaps that were previously too far or narrow to jump. In my opinion, it's a much more satisfying form of progression than just getting a key to the next level, since it adds to the gameplay itself. Seeing an out-of-reach item is actually kind of exciting, because usually it means you'll be getting a way to reach it soon. And then you can feel all smart because you remember to go back for it. Plus, it keeps the barrier to entry fairly low. Your controls start simple and gradually get more complicated as the game progresses, giving you plenty of time to get used to a new mechanic before introducing the next one. For more direct genre comparison, Hollow Knight is a premier example of a Metroidvania and has many of the same gameplay conventions. If you're on my channel, it's likely because of my Rain World video, and if you like Rain World, then you like Hollow Knight because for some reason the Venn diagram for those fandoms is a circle. And if you like Hollow Knight, you'll like Nine Souls. Exploration and platforming in Nine Souls is fairly straightforward but satisfying. Don't touch the red, stick to the green, climb the rope, jump on the platform, grapple to these spots. It becomes more complicated as the game goes on and you gain more abilities, but in the end it still boils down to those 5 points. Red bad, green good, rope, platform, and grapple. But this platforming is frequently happening alongside the combat, which makes both aspects that much more challenging. Sometimes these platforming sections have some solid puzzle elements to them, usually using a neat mechanic called the Mystic Nymph, which is basically a hacking drone that you can deploy and fly around to scout the map with. Sometimes an impassable obstacle requires you to fly your nymph to these blue nymph holes and hold a button, or do a little obstacle course and then hold a button. But sometimes the nymph is used in true puzzles. I don't remember any of these being absolutely required to progress, so they are potentially skippable if you're okay with missing out on the reward. If all you care about is getting to the end, probably a good half of the map or so could go completely unexplored. But if you want to upgrade your health bar, healing pipe, damage, get every skill, find new jades, unlock the true ending, or acquire currency without grinding, you really should explore every nook and cranny. I'm generally pretty shit at finding secrets, and I managed to get the achievement, so trust me when I say that searching for every piece of loot is really not that hard. Once you find the map bot for an area and get their map chip, the game will tell you how many things are left to find, so you don't need to worry about forgetting to come back for an unreachable treasure. It's fun to go adventuring for items or side quests from the NPCs, especially because there are very few rewards that feel disappointing to get. In terms of combat, Nine Souls feels very much like a 2D Sekiro. And I don't mean that in a holy shit you can dodge roll, this game truly makes you feel like a Dark Soul kind of way. I mean, nearly the entirety of Nine Souls combat and a few other supplementary mechanics are cut whole cloth from Sekiro and translated to 2D, which I'm sure the devs would admit to. That's not a slight against the game, by the way. Sekiro is a very good place to draw inspiration from, and Nine Souls makes the ideas its own, beyond the flattening of dimensions. Besides, I think the patenting of game mechanics is a completely asinine concept that stifles creativity and innovation. What do you mean I can't have any other games than Nemesis system, Warner Bros?
It's my IP to sit on and do nothing with.
Like Sekiro, the core of Nine Souls combat is built around parrying enemy attacks. Incoming attacks are telegraphed clearly with a wind-up animation and a sparkle, and if you hit the parry button at the exact moment an attacker would hit you, it is instead parried, dealing no damage and giving you 1 key point. If you slightly mistime your button press, you instead get an imperfect parry, which will still give you a key point but will inflict temporary internal damage that can be slowly healed over time if you don't accrue any more of it. If you completely miss the parry window, the attack goes through and hits you normally, dealing full damage and making any internal damage you have permanent. Okay, so it's a block button I can mess up. Why not just dodge every attack instead? Well, your sword attack does decent chip damage to enemies, but you'll quickly find that against tougher opponents, it just doesn't quite do the trick. If you stand your ground and parry enemy attacks, you can spend your key points to stick a talisman-shaped bomb to an enemy, and the more key points you have, the more damage the explosion does. Now that's a lot of damage. The talisman bomb will also convert any internal damage the enemy has from special counters into true damage. Just be careful, as you can still be hit before being able to detonate your talisman, which will cancel the explosion and only deal the enemy some internal, so you have to correctly time your talisman to avoid getting interrupted, as well as timing parries. The talisman is the big difference between Nine Souls and Sekiro, because here, parries do not automatically translate into damage. Instead, there is a middleman that you have to go through for your precise mashing of the right bumper to mean anything. It seems small, but it really does change how the whole system feels. While finding opportunities to attack is helpful in Sekiro, it's not completely necessary in most cases. But here you really do have to allocate that much more headspace for finding or creating openings so you can best manage your key economy and maximize damage output. As you get later into the game and get new abilities, enemies will expect you to use and master those new skills, as well as just making standard attack patterns more complicated to parry, keeping combat fresh and challenging. With how fun the combat is, it's easy to forget that the dev team's previous titles were psychological horror games. While combat out in the open world against these generic goons is fun enough, the combat system is at its best during the boss fights. The bosses are just so good, and I mean, the game is named after them, so you would hope so. Each boss functions as a kind of skill check, making sure that you've learned the new abilities you are given on your way to meet them. They can be quite tough, but they never felt too unfair to me, though the Ornstein and Smo fight was a little annoying because I can't visually process more than one thing at a time. If you feel like you need a little boost in some aspect of the combat, there's likely a Jade that can help. Jades are the equivalent to charms in Hollow Knight. They provide powerful boosts such as quicker healing, applying the talisman to multiple enemies, healing temporary damage with sword strikes, or just getting more money from kills. However, you have a limited number of slots for Jades, so finding a loadout that fits your playstyle is key. Personally, I liked having Jades that help me manage my internal damage, since recovering that health is not the easiest to do mid-boss fight. The bosses, or the souls, are at the core of every aspect of this game, up to and including the basic premise for Nine Souls' story is simple. You must scour the facility for the members of the council, the Nine Souls, to enact your revenge for being cast out and killed. This is the most boiled down and essential element of the plot which cannot be missed, and yet is the least interesting part of the story. As always, I will do my best to avoid getting into major spoilers, but I want to talk about how Nine Souls develops its characters. I apologize if I completely butcher the pronunciation of these proper nouns, but I am chronically American, and unfortunately it is terminal. Nine Souls employs some interesting dramatic irony where the character you play as, this little white cat man named Yi, knows significantly more about the world than you as the player, who has to uncover what the purpose of this facility is and what Yi has to do with it. There are 6 friendly NPCs you'll be interacting with who each have roles to play in the plot, gameplay, or both. But while they are all likable, the main star is Xuan, a human child who Yi formed a bond with during his exile in the human village. This adorable little snot weasel is the heart of the story, and the one person who can crack Yi's edgelord shell. As you explore, you can find items like tools, art supplies, seeds, or other interesting objects you can give the kid for character scenes and the occasional material reward. I usually despise children, in real life and in games, but I was always looking forward to getting new interactions with Xuan. Every item you give him will have some visible effect on the pavilion, slowly turning this cool, polished, but relatively bland hub zone into a homey, colorful mess that is really quite charming. I can't help but feel there is some parallel here between the pavilion and Yi himself. As he becomes less broody and cold, the more he allows himself to care for Xuan. I think it's a nice visual metaphor. A number of the other characters also have smaller side quests that you will tend to complete just by beating the game, like finding poisons for Shenong to get drunk and increase your max HP, or getting map data for the damage assistant robot to see if there's loot to find, or buying various items from the War Machine turned Scholar. The larger, less personal plot unfolds rather slowly as you piece together information from various parts of the facility, but things are clearly not going well. Most areas are malfunctioning in some way due to lack of maintenance. There are corpses growing strange flowers with disturbing crime scene reports related to them. The souls seem obsessive, cruel, or uncaring at first brush. And of course, there is the whole human organ harvesting operation happening at the heart of all this. All the while, Yi is having flashbacks to his childhood and a conspicuously missing sister. If I had a nickel for every game where you platform around a dying world and fight mutant monsters as a small white creature with a missing family, I'd have 4 nickels, which is not enough to do anything with, but is a frankly surprising amount. Red Candle Games calls Nine Souls lore heavy, and that is an accurate assessment. Truthfully, it took me a frankly embarrassing amount of time to figure out what or where this facility even is, just because of all the scattered information you get and the confusion of there being ruins next to the Hypertech power reservoir and gene forge. But in the end, it all made some sort of sense. It's not Dark Souls. You don't need to pore over hundreds of lines of item descriptions to learn that the big tree thing is a power source for this alien civilization, because that information, and information like it, is mercifully given to you in clear terms that pop up on your screen when you interact with dedicated lore pickups. The world building here is genuinely fascinating, and while I don't really expect the universe to be returned to in the future, I'm sure there is enough here to build another game off of, if Red Candle really wanted to. All told, I really enjoy the story of the game, both foreground and background. I'll definitely think about the characters for a while, and that includes a number of the souls, for various reasons. It's been a while since I've said this, but yeah, going into Nine Souls for the story is well worth it, even if you're not much of a gamer. There's even a story mode option that turns the sometimes brutal difficulty down a notch if you want a more narrative experience. And if that's what you want to do, don't let any grease-soaked gamer essentialists put you off the game. So, let's wrap this thing up, shall we? I would consider Nine Souls an instant classic Metroidvania on par with Hollow Knight. While it has by no means done poorly, I think it's kind of a shame it doesn't have more attention. Whether it's the fast, reactive, Sekiro-like combat, or the emotional, intriguing cyberpunk setting and story, Or if you just adore this art style and music as much as I do, there is plenty to love here. It's well worth the money. For every indie dev you support, an angel doesn't sever someone's brainstem. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of the games I develop obsessions with. Leave a comment maybe, let me know what you think of the game or the video, and I guess smash that notification bell or whatever the tubers say these days if you really want to see more. Analytics tell me that most of my subscribers don't seem to get my new videos, so maybe that helps. I hate this. I'll finish off the video now. Goodbye.